Good morning, guys. How we doing? Underneath what I'm going to talk about for a minute, I'm going to play some fabulous Cohn, and then we're going to play 12 Degrees of Separation with Cohn in a minute. So stay tuned for that. First of all, I started my Patreon channel yesterday. I have a pretty darn good response already. Thank you to those who have donated and subscribed to that additional content. Of course, I'm going to strive to make this stuff valuable to you guys and give you as much quality information as I can. You know, I'd like nothing more than to be able to do this for a living and put even more time into my research and just the whole thought processes and time I put into my episodes. If I have revenue coming in from it, it justifies it a whole lot more to my family and my wife. So again, thank you for those who have already become a patron. I'll put a link in the bottom for those who are still interested. I'll put one up here in a minute too. But Patreon, if you got a few extra bucks a month to help throw me to support this so we can keep doing this, and so I gotta go back to 9 to 5, that'd be fantastic. Secondly, I reached a milestone yesterday on this channel. 20 of my vids now, my videos, have made it to 1,000 views. One's well over 2,400, a Blue Note episode, I believe. And most of the top ones are either Miles, Coltrane, or Blue Note stuff, it seems like. But 20 of my episodes now have 1,000 views. And it doesn't sound like a big number, and maybe it's not, but when you factor in how many episodes I'm doing a week, the fact that some of those back catalog episodes are still getting watched, and people see them as valuable, and are going back and digging into the old material, it is quite a library of stuff. And as we go forward, we're going to regurgitate and rehash some of it, and my perspectives and knowledge and insight will always grow and change. So that stuff's always going to be there for people, and I'm proud to say that 20 of those videos now have over 1,000 views. That's, to me, a nice milestone and a feather in my cap. 1,000 views just feels like a nice number, you know. And most of my episodes get between 400 and 600 views in the first week, and after the first day, you know, like 300-400 the first day, 500-600 at the best, and they kind of drop off because there's a new video coming the next day. And so it's great to see that some of these videos are still being dug up. Next thing I want to talk about is I get to a point sometimes in my life where I just need to retreat from the world that is. The news, the media, and I don't watch TV, I don't. I have, we watch a few things on Netflix, we watch a few things on Amazon. The Boss Show has been fantastic, I love it. I've actually been watching The Naked City from 1958, season 1. Danny Muldoon, my boy, Hannaran. It's great, the grid of New York City being filmed in the actual streets and on location. This is Law and Order in 58. Things had always been done in film studios before this. There was no real exterior shooting in television, and the film industry had moved out to the West Coast. So everything in New York now was being done in the sound studio with that curve at the end of the street, which New York streets don't have. And so to get back to that New York grid and the real grit, and some of the locations they go to, they were at this trash incinerating site yesterday with this huge bucket, and this guy has the damsel in distress over the top, and Danny Muldoon shows up, and they're doing these shootouts, and there's this cosmopolitan city that's just at the edges trying to escape itself. All these races and cultures are on top of each other. It's such an interesting, complex time. There's some jazz on the show and some other great music as well. If you haven't seen The Naked City, it's really fantastic. If you like good writing, good acting, good narrating, and you don't just want to see helicopters exploding in buildings. If you're just about CGI, you'll be bored. But if you like dialogue, if you like insight into humanity, it's great. I'm really digging it. Anyway, but I get to a point where I'm just kind of fed up with this. The ugly, the stress, the depressing, the lies, the trying to cipher through what's being said to me and trying to understand the motivations behind what's being said to me. And the detective work gets exhausting sometimes, sometimes I just shut it out. And I came to this realization a few years ago, and it's really helped me kind of find peace. And of course, what happened in Minneapolis last month kind of brought a lot of politics and stuff back out of me, because a lot of my friends were being directly impacted by it. And it was stirring seeing some of the footage and videos, and then seeing the mainstream perception of it on the news versus what I really saw firsthand. It just makes your blood boil, and it makes you want to speak of the injustice, that same injustice that fuels this music, you know, not so much Al Cohn, but the black community in general. But there's times where I don't want to deal and think about the world. I've looked into it for most of my life, studied geography, and sometimes I gotta blank it out. And the way I was able to do that was I came to realize that the Western theology of the Great Reformation is partly to blame. We keep thinking that we're going to reform the world from evil, and that the evil people must become good. And when you really check that theory in your heart and your mind and your soul, you know for a fact that there's no such thing as the land of bad people, the race of bad people, the culture of bad people. And so this great reformation of trying to convert the world to good, to my belief system, to my religion, the evangel of that, it's a dead-end waste of time, because every one of us has good and evil in us. Every one of us each day goes into the world and makes 4 or 5 choices a day. Some are the right thing, some are the wrong thing. And I'm going to be humble here. I make the wrong choices with my stepkids sometimes. I'm not a great dad every day, but I try to make the right thing more than I do the wrong thing. I'm not the perfect husband. Sometimes we're selfish. Sometimes we don't see the other one's struggle. I got the best wife in the world, by the way, just so y'all know. And I love her dearly. And we are great 99% of the time. But there's times where I'm insensitive. And that humility makes me realize that right and wrong is a choice that we have to make every day to do the right thing, the best of our ability. And that means that good and evil will both always exist. And that the only power I really have, I can't stop the world from doing the wrong thing. Because a lot of the world's doing the right thing, and the ones who do the wrong thing do the right thing sometimes. All I can do is choose for myself to do the right thing as often as possible. And I can live with that. I can sleep with myself at night, knowing I don't got to go out there and crusade. Whether I mean being protest, revolutionary, militant, violent. So all those things end up putting me in the wrong eventually. I don't need to get my name on some list by being out there burning rocks at shit. I need to do the right thing for me and my consciousness and my world, so I can sleep with myself at night, knowing that, according to me and my responsibility, I'm taking care of that. And it's so easy to get swept up in the current of the movements that this world has to offer us. But I can't ever really buy into them or believe in any of it too much. Because as much as I understand history, I know for a fact that Rome lied to its citizens all the time. I know for a fact Lenin and Stalin wasn't always telling the truth. I know for a fact that the British Empire is citizens at home perspective of this global sun never setting on the British Empire kind of statement wasn't as appreciated in East Pakistan and India and the United States. It's such a perspective thing. And so to think that the world today is telling me the truth, those who are in charge are going to let me know the secrets of what's really going on? No. They're going to put me on sides. They're going to pit me against other people. They're going to distract me with bullshit. And generally when the smoke is the thickest is when the biggest trick is happening. So I think whenever something going down that they're trying to get us really to focus on, you need to look somewhere else and go, where that damn mirror? Where is it? What's really happening? What you really doing? And I'm guaranteeing you're picking somebody's pocket somewhere. That being said, we're going to move on. Today what we're going to do is something kind of fun. Something I just kind of came up with. There's a connection you make with records. And you think of a record or an artist, and often it'll make you think of another artist or another figure in jazz. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to see what my first connection was from this artist to the next artist, and follow that path and see if I can eventually get back to the artist I started with in 10, 12 steps. 12 steps of jazz separation. Today we're doing Al Cohn. I mentioned Al Cohn the other day. I can't remember what episode it was. But this is on the Great Dawn label, number 1110. First of all, this album cover is outstanding. It just screams 50s, hipster, beret and a Vespa, a mocha, and can I get a biscuit, darling? What do you have? I want something fantastic. And, oh, they have biscuit? I'll take a biscuit. It's just got that vibe to it. The imagery, the color, it's just great. And Al Cohn's a player I love a lot. We'll probably do an episode on him at some point. I got probably 6, 7 Al Cohn records. Plus, he's got quite a bit of work where they work as brothers with Getz and Zoot Sims and some of those records like that. So I got quite a bit of Al Cohn, but he's got this great tone. Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins, Zoot Sims, Al Cohn. Al Cohn's right there in that pocket. And he's beautiful. He's got a hint of bright light in his sound. It's not the light of Coltrane, but there's still an opening at the end of it that has this flower coming out. Some guys feel kind of closed in. His sound has an opening, embrace. And he plays the blues like a brother. And this record took me a while to find when I was digging into the Dawn label. I think I was brought there by Lucky Thompson and Zoot Sims doing their biographies and looking at their discographies. I would see this name Dawn pop up. I'm like, Dawn label? That's a cool little sounding label. And there's only about 25, 24 jazz titles. It's a subsidiary of Seco. Dawn label's fantastic. Those Zoot Sims are great. The Jazz Modes. There's another one that brought me there. Charlie Rouse's group with Julius Watkins, French horn player. Those Les Modes records are fantastic. But there's the Paul Kinnacher record. There's some stuff on the Dawn label that's just really great. And this Al Cohn record, you see right away, because a lot of these Dawn records have the inner sleeve with a lot of the other albums on it. And this one jumped on me. I'm like, I love that cover. I want it. And it's one of those times where I looked at the record and said to myself, oh man, I used to walk in old Jaime's records back on East Lake Street back in the 90s. I remember this sitting in one of those little rotating cap things. This thing sat in there for a year, I bet. I remember going in there all the time and seeing that. And I was still looking for the Grateful Dead. I was still looking for Stones records I didn't have. I maybe had a Coltrane record because I was a jazz guy. But I didn't really know. I wasn't about to start digging into things like this. I remember at the Carmen record on Contemporary, Barney Kessel, and this was sitting right above it on this little rotating. Probably wasn't even meant for LPs. Probably meant for calendars originally, and it was a little wobbly because it was an old record shop. But he knew what it was. Of course, he knew everything, Jaime, but it wasn't where I was at the time. But when you see it, sometimes you're like, oh man. I bet you it was like $5 back in 1996 too. Shit. And I found this in Chicago at Reckless Records. The one on probably North Broadway or Clark is up there, north of Miracle Mile and north of Gold Coast. I found it up there, and it actually wasn't that expensive. I think it was $29.99 for an actual old pressing. And oddly enough, This has just been reissued by some label reissue thing, that 180 gram vinyl one I think it is, and I found it in there for like 25 bucks, a new one, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll buy this because this one online often goes for 80, 100 bucks, and then I looked on the wall, I'm like, oh, they got another copy of it up there, and then I looked close, I'm like, oh, it's used, and I'm like, oh, it's an original pressing for $5 more than that reissue with the wrong looking colors and the slightly off palette on the material. I'll take that old one, thank you very much. It's just gorgeous, and like it's a little bit of church. You put that on and read your Sunday paper, darling. Can I have a crumpet? It's relaxing, it's soothing, and interesting enough, my next record, this is going to lead me to, is by the great Marilyn Moore, who was his wife. I believe his first wife. And they had a son, Joe or Sam Cohn, who's a guitar player. I just saw his name and now I'm blanking on it. This Marilyn Moore record is a tough record to find. It's outstanding in every way I can think of. Bethlehem, if you've watched any of my series on Bethlehem, has three distinct styles to what they're doing. And it's very interesting because they have two separate lines, the BCP 1 through 81, and then the 6000 series. And you'd think they would split these three entities up, but they're all just intermingled. It's really kind of bizarre. But there's a strong East Coast presence with some really great recordings on the East Coast. In '54, they opened up a West Coast office and start recording all the great West Coast session guys who weren't getting leadership roles on Capitol or on Contemporary. They got these guys in the studio, Stu Williamson, Claude Williamson, the great tenor alto player, I can't think of his name right now, Charlie Mariano. Some of these guys got these great Bethlehem records in 54, 55, outstanding, Max Bennett, Stan Levy. And then there's also, Bethlehem has this great vocal array of artists. Just an elephant in the room, my goodness. And you got her, who is friends with Billie Holiday. And I saw this somewhere. I can't remember where I saw it, but my recollection is correct. She was married to Al Cohn, and I believe Billie Holiday babysat their child, the young Mr. Cohn. I believe Billie Holiday babysat their child. And so you leave Billie in charge of your kid. I don't mind if you try to sing like her a little bit. And honestly, she has her own thing as well. She's not just a Billie ripoff. I don't know if that's alcohol. There's probably alcohol right there next to her. It's just a beautiful record. It is. Every song in this record is outstanding. And I'm sure by now you have a pretty good idea who that's going to lead me to. And you'd be correct in saying Billie Holiday. And Billie is a gal that needs less introduction than most of these people probably do. She's one of the first artists that pretty much any fan of music is going to come along to. And this record's kind of got a sadness to it. It's a memorial album because she recorded this session in '58 and she dies before it's even released. And she's pretty weak and frail, but she's still Billie. She's a little thinner, both in her voice and in her appearance. The illness is kind of taken over. And it's been a rough life for Billie Holiday, from singing in brothels at the age of 6 to drinking and brawling with the boys to the life on the road, the racism that she saw. Billie went through a lot, and that sorrow is in every syllable of what she does. And of course we'll do an episode on Billie Holiday at some point. She's one of the many greats we haven't even touched on outside of on episodes like this where we're talking about a lot of different artists. But I need to do an episode on Billie Holiday. Believe that. So, and this is with the Ray Ellis Orchestra. And so it's kind of orchestral, pastoral. And again, it's toward the end. It's at the MGM label. And MGM is about to buy Verve if they haven't already. And she's doing stuff with Norman Granz at this time as well. And so maybe this is right after the sale or the purchase of Verve, and they put this one on MGM label to be a little bit more commercial with the Ray Ellis Orchestra. But it's still a sad epitaph of a gal whose genius was a bigger cart to carry than this horse could pull. She was given a great talent, but the burden of what she carried was so strong. And of course, that's a lot of what informs her talent. Talent without soul doesn't move me. There's a lot of great virtuoso guitar players out there that don't stir the cocktail. You know, some of that Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Yngwie Malmsteen. I come from a metal background, and so I used to hear those cats. And I'm like, this doesn't rock. This doesn't roll. This is rigid. There's something wrong here. I never really got that kind of virtuosity for the sake of ego. Never really stirred my drink. I'd rather feel what the fuck it is that you talking about, where the fuck you coming from. I don't want to talk about how great you are. I want to talk about what you feel. What you know. What's your insight telling you into this world. How great you are doesn't really interest me a whole lot. Because greater men have come and gone. And I need to find peace for myself and find my own salvation. And if you ain't got nothing to share with me along those lines, great, you're a great guitar player. Good luck to you. So you can't talk about Billie without talking about Lester Young. So number 4 on my 12 degrees of separation, Al Cohn to Al Cohn, is the great Lester Young. And I wanted to play this sad one here because it's kind of where around the time where she was hanging around the Cohns. But there's no mistaking that Billie and Lester Young were one of the most special partnerships in jazz. Just sacred ground. And there's a recording of them on TV from 56, 57, and it's a large group. They assembled it for some TV special, probably around the holidays. And you can just see that even though they had a falling out, they still had this admiration and respect. And they kind of look at each other when they're playing. And she kind of smiles as he's saying some things on the horn. And then as she's singing, he kind of is hearing what she has to say back to him. And she's almost having a separate conversation with Lester while singing the lyrics to the rest of the world. It's pretty amazing the levels jazz artists communicate at. And Lester Young's career is broad. He's in a lot of great swing bands. He's a super innovator on the saxophone, the alto saxophone. He's a bridge between the early era swing cats and bebop. And he was right there during a lot of bebop. Lester is always one of the most melodic players, most lyrical players. And if you are doing a song and that song needs to share something with us, you better believe that Lester Young is going to find a way to tell that story. And you got to appreciate it so much. Hodges has some of the same cream, and then you get to the Dave Brubeck group, and you hear Paul Desmond, and you might wonder where does Desmond get what he's doing from, and it's clearly from Lester, you know, and Johnny Hodges. But melody, storytelling, the blues, and I think this is Roy Eldridge here, if I recall, maybe Sweets Edison. Jesse Drake's. Don't even know who that is. Anyway, this is an old Savoy record. This was recorded probably in the late 40s, early 50s by Savoy. Issued on LP. Like Charlie Parker, like Fats Navarro, like Dizzy Gillespie, all the 12,000 series stuff that those guys are putting out in the 55, 56 on Savoy. It's all earlier material by those guys. They've all either moved on to other labels or passed away. There's no current 55, 56, 57 Savoy recordings by these guys. It's all going to be kind of a vintage release, reissuing kind of a thing. But so they'll all be from multiple sessions. They're not going to have the homogeneity of a session recorded by three guys at the same time. Different players, different sessions, different time of days. You know what I mean? It's going to change how you play and what you have to say. All the same, Lester stuff on Savoy, it's fantastic. It's fantastic, and he's a guy that every collection needs to have some Lester Young. And if nothing else, go back and look for some of the great Billie Holiday, Lester Young stuff that's out there. So where do you go from Lester Young? Well, they used to call Lester Young Prez. And they called him Prez because he was the king of that shit. And so we're going to look at Vice Prez now, Paul Kinneshay. And fantastic session. Paul Kinneshay sounds a lot like Lester. Apparently he's a Denver kid. And Denver and jazz, I think I've seen the name Denver come up in jazz in association with Paul Kinneshay, and that's it. I don't think there's a great deal when they clean this record. What's cool about these records, they're all Prestige. There's actually two of them. 7127, 7147. 4-Basie reunion. And it was essentially Kinneshay and the group, Clayton, Jack Washington, Freddie Green, Eddie Jones, Joe Jones, Nat Pierce, Shad Collins, Walter Page. It's getting the band back together without Basie, but doing kind of a tribute to what we did with Basie on the Prestige label. This is as close as Prestige gets to Basie and that kind of real straight Basie type swing. These are great records. Great cover. Just all these guys are giants of this music. And Walter Page, Joe Jones, Count Basie and Freddie Green is probably the greatest rhythm section in jazz history. Those four guys. You know, there's the Hank Jones, Barry Galbraith, Ozzie Johnson, Milt Hinton. But it's one of those two, man. Those are rhythm sections that were so versatile. And the Basie one could swing till the cows came home, and then Milt Hinton, Ozzie Johnson, that quartet rhythm section could do anything. Anything. From Coca-Cola commercials to the softest of fluff to the hardest driving stuff. And so these records are great. Vice Prez, Paul Kinneshay, deserves more recognition than he gets. He has that great record on Bethlehem with Charlie Rouse. The Chase Is On, tough to find record. He does some stuff at Emersy that's really good. He kind of disappears. And he's one of those guys that kind of just disappears into obscurity. And you don't see much from Paul Kinneshay after mid to late 60s. And I can't remember if he resurfaces and does some recordings later, but I think he went into teaching or something if I recall. But Vice Prez, you gotta love Paul Kinneshay. So where do you go from Paul Kinneshay and the boys playing Basie? You go to Count Basie. And this Atomic record, the Atomic Mr. Basie, is this record will teach you what swing is. It's very well spaced. It's so elemental, man. Because Basie's always instructing the minimalization. Don't do nothing you don't need to do. Do what the song needs it to be done. It's also minimal. A swell, and boy, Neil Hefti and Harry Mancini borrow from May Basie as well too, don't they? Basie. Basie's career is immense. His discography is immense. This is as good a place to start with Basie as you're gonna get. And his early stuff is groundbreaking for the degree of swing and how influential it was and how earth-changing it was for people to hear that early swing of Basie. But his later groups in the 60s and 70s, the recording engineering, the virtuosity, the quality of the bands, it's just unbelievable. The guys that are playing with them, from Locked Out to Fat Jones, all the way down the line. It's just a who's who of jazz greats. And you were a fortunate person to have a chair in Basie's group. You know, it was always a chair that would be kept warm for you as well. It seems like a lot of guys were around and then come back to him. Where we go from Basie now? Basie was Sinatra. And for a lot of white America, this is how you heard Count Basie.
Let me play
and make no mistake about it, these are great records. I believe he does another one on Reprise, or maybe it's on Roulette. But Sinatra and Basie do several things together. And this record is outstanding. And this song is fairly universal. And you'll hear this in films, and even kids kind of know Fly Me to the Moon. But it's something I played a lot at my brunch gig. And people just are like, oh, it's a common celebratory piece. And the world needs that. The world needs that. And I'm not going to belabor this one too much, especially seeing as how it's going to be the one where the boss is most likely going to hear it and make me edit it. So I go from Basie and Frank to Frank with Antonio Carlos Rabin. And this is my favorite Frank record. I've said it before. I'll say it again. There's a restraint in Frank here that he doesn't often have. He's very big and egotistical, and I love Frank. I listen to him play him quite a lot, but here he recognizes that these pieces don't have 110% effort, volume, extension of your voice. It requires a certain reduction, a graceful, minimalized Frank. He's not going to overpower that soft guitar. He's not going to squash those beautiful strings by Klaus Ogerman. He wants to lace himself and weave between those filaments. Fantastic Frank record. And you can play any song on that record at a DJ gig and not regret that whatsoever. And so now we go from Frank and Joe Beam to Joe Beam and Stan Getz with Joao Gilberto. And this record is just full of legendary songs. I'm a super big fan and condone people to buy this record. I don't think people should shy away from this because it's commercial. You need commercial some days. You can love Mingus and Monk all day long, but sometimes your aunt's gonna be there. Sometimes your nanny is gonna be hanging out, waiting for you to pay her. Sometimes you got the rosé on ice, darling, but it isn't chilled yet. Let's wait for Dustin Venato to play, then we'll pour it. And you need this elegance. This jazz can be a lot of things. And this is just the texture that people should have and love and enjoy. And so that leads me from Joe Beam and Getz to early Getz on Prestige, where he's playing with Zoot Sims. And this is an earlier Stan Getz here. This Getz has a lot more fire, a lot more bebop. It's funny, I think White Cats played bebop better than they played hard bop. In fact, I can't think of too many records that White Cats are doing hard bop. Bebop was numerical, mathematical, required great degrees of virtuosity, and was on some level very ego-driven. It was proving your ability from the opening moment of the song through the entire thing. We're gonna go. And there was a lot of White Cats who were super educated, super talented, knew music theory, knew their horns, and could excel at bebop. Hard bop requires a different kind of soulful expression, more of an anger and a pain for you to drop down a gear, put it into that different pocket. You got a little more torque now. See what I'm saying? We was just built for speed at bebop. At hard bop, we got some pulling power. And there's this message that's being expressed on hard bop records that bebop records rarely have. It's a message on hard bop that few white players can express. They don't have a deep enough rooted anger or level of injustice in their life to get that gutsy, bluesy, still that blister tempo, but it's got more groove. Anyway, this is a great record. It's calling early sessions on Prestige here. Oddly enough, Al Cohn does show up on this as well, but I didn't want to end it here. So we're playing Zoot Sims, Al Cohn, Kai Winding, George Wallington, Percy Heath, and Stan Getz, of course, and just fun early 50s white guys throwing it down, which of course leads me to Zoot Sims, who is a great player, and his stuff on Dawn label I mentioned is outstanding. But Zoot, Al, Serge Chaloff, Richie Kamuka, a lot of these guys were doing these records together. The Four Brothers, the Brothers. This has Herb Stewart, well, I don't really know too well, but Zoot Sims, Sir Shaloff, and Al Cohn. And this is on the Vic label, which I've since learned is a subsidiary of the RCA label, if I recall. It's just a kind of like a jazzier imprint for them to have. And in some ways, it's just when you send records to the record store, they're like, oh, this is on Vic, this goes in the jazz section. Versus an RCA record that could go in a lot of different places. If you own a record store, you should know who Zoot Sims is in 1956. But again, RCA distributes across the country. So you got Joe Thumb in Kansas City who came in from Wichita, worked at the record store, and he's like, what's a Zoot? Herb? Oh, it's on Vic, it's jazz. You gotta help people out, man. Because most people don't dig too deep beyond their own little coma. Wake up them comas, people. But it takes a little digging and looking deeper into the crystal to come out of the coma. And jazz, to me, helps me go, you know what? I'm gonna step back from that whole thing. And I go stretches where I don't think or talk about politics for a long time. I might talk some social issues and injustice because jazz puts me in that frame of mind sometimes. Especially when I hear a brother screaming through his horns and shit. I'm like, oh, yeah, man, I know what you're trying to tell me. It's been tough, hasn't it? I can't really get that from white cats very often. Let's just be honest about it. But that's part of the joy of this music, is it does tell you and give you different things to feel. I do love Surge, by the way. And of course, I could have gone that direction as well. But this is number 11. So where do we end up? Back at Al Cohn. And this is Al Cohn Quintet on the Chorale label. And Chorale is a subsidiary of Decca, if I recall. So both RCA and Decca, whose jazz repertoires left a lot to be desired, and make a lot of white, commercial, watered down jazz? Is that jazz? I'm not sure. They created jazzier imprints with Vic and then with Chorale, but for the most part, these are still very white labels. Even on their jazz imprint, it's White Cats. It's White Cats. Bob Brookmeyer. Joe Newman does get a record on Chorale, and he was the trumpet player with Basie, if I recall right. But anyway, that's 12 Degrees of Separation. Al Cohn back to Al Cohn. That was kind of fun, and it might be something you guys want to try at home. Give me your 10, 12 degrees of separation. Start one artist and just see where your mind connects to eventually get you back there. It's kind of fun. If you guys like that, let me know. Maybe we can do that again sometime soon. We're going to try to do the throw grabber once every couple weeks, because I think throw grabbers are fun. And every time I'm going through episodes and records, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a song that grabbed my attention. And that's what that basically it means. It's a song that made me sit up and go, oh shit, yeah, I noticed that. Someone just called my attention right there. And the heavy shit calls your attention, man. So anyway, appreciate you all. Check out my Patreon page. If you got a few bucks to throw at the cause to help me keep this going, be much appreciated. Unemployment's got about 4 payments left, and I gotta have income coming in. So we'll see what happens. You know, I appreciate you all. Let's all enjoy today. Have a good day. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Tell your friends about it. And when you check out the Patreon page, take a look at the Jazz Journal, the online video magazine that I'm putting together. There's a preview of some of what the content's going to be. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And it's going to review one record from all the great jazz labels in the 50s and 60s. And for example, in this first episode, I'm going to give you the first release by all the great jazz labels. What was the first 12-inch album they put out? And then maybe next month I'm going to do what's the best drummer-led session on every one of these labels. What's the best, most popular record all these labels did? And then sometimes they might just be a variable odd sequence of a label, one record from each label. But I think I'm going to do themes to it at times, just to kind of give that cross-reference. So I think it's important for people to grasp how broad jazz was, how many labels were putting out the canon of this music. It wasn't just Impulse and Blue Note. there's 15, 16 labels that are doing the bulk of it at this time. Dozens of smaller ones that sprinkle in canon pieces. And then the major labels are putting out volumes of material, but only a dab here and there of what they're doing is really jazz canon stuff. And I want people to keep seeing that, because there's a reason why Blue Note is where it's at. And we need to remember Prestige and Riverside and Argo and Emersy and all the other labels far more than we do. And we need to stop just listening to what Columbia tells us. And boy, Columbia dominates the jazz listener of today in a lot of ways. Y'all be safe. Have a good day. Try to do the right thing today. Keep the wrong thing to a small one. Peace.